The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks Geezers and Googlization Show, the home of Googlization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about all the crazy shift going on in the world of HR, recruitment, and business. I'm your host, Ira Wolf, and I'm joined again by my co-host, Keith Campagna. So happy first birthday, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Nation. And welcome back to all the listeners. We're excited to have our dedicated audience back for another episode and welcome any new listeners that are tuning in. We are celebrating our first show of our second season with the new grand opening thing, which you heard. We got a new sponsor, Zor.ai. We'll be talking about them in a few minutes too. And the launch of Googlization Nation. To get access to tips, exclusive articles, interviews, discounts to courses, just sign up. It's free. You can go to successperformancesolutions.com or geeksgeezersgooglization.com and just click on the Join Googlization Nation button. A lot more coming on that too, but we wanted to get it started to coordinate with our second season here. And to add to all our festivities, Keith is live on site today at the HR Technology Conference in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm very jealous. Hopefully what he's learning in Vegas won't stay in Vegas, and he's going to share it with us. So what is happening in the city that never sleeps, Keith?
I tell you what, it's crazy. HR Tech, somebody threw a 10,000 attendee number at me. I didn't realize HR Tech was this big. There's a whole lot of, I would say there's everything we talk about and we've talked about this last year is here in some way, shape, or form. A lot of the, or at least a few of the guests that we've had in the past, they're here as keynote speakers. And it's really that combination of what I'm calling artificial and emotional intelligence. You know, what's really going to happen with HR? And I get a better sense that HR Tech is bringing the progressive thinkers, the HR people that are trying to move forward, and a lot more action, a lot more energy is here because people are trying to figure out how to get things back. I haven't had much chance or much time yet to talk to the people that are going in and out of the sessions. That'll be later on today. But I could tell you there's a whole lot of interesting vendors and a real good learning environment here. A lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm jealous. I wish I was there. It just lands on some times that just don't work out. So it's pretty amazing. I guess as you were talking, I guess the concern is, and I've heard this pop up in a couple different conversations. I think we talked about this with Ben Eubanks and a couple other people. That in one sense, you've got everybody that's 10,000 people that are out at HR Technology. You have the group that when I was out at SHRM Talent last spring, people very progressive, open-minded, looking for new ways of doing things. And then there's the rest of the people. It's just there's a lot going on. So it seems that there's, when we talk in generalizations and stereotypes of how bad things are, there's a group that is advancing pretty quickly, understands what the scope is, and then there's a whole other group. And unfortunately, I don't have any statistics, but I suspect it's the larger population of HR and recruitment and companies that are just struggling, that they're sort of stuck in the status quo. They don't understand the pace at which things are changing, and that's disconcerting at best.
And I agree with you. I'm going with the 80-20 rule here and saying that the progressive group are the 20%ers that are literally making a difference. And the conversation I had last night with some of the awesome HR tech people that are here on the vendor side, Ira, is that you look at the way that when you use technology the right way, you do accelerate your growth as compared to the traditional manual methodologies. So if you're not at least keeping pace with the pace of technology, it's no longer linear disadvantage. It's becoming exponential in its damage, and the opportunity cost right now could be critical. I'm not trying to make it seem like I could see how the future of every business is going to be, but I got to believe that if you don't get on top of turning HR away from the administration and into the employee engagement, however you define employee engagement, I think that you're going to find yourself without the right employees, and it's not going to be easy to recover with the way that the talent marketplace is, and in the economy. It's going to play a role sooner or later, and I think you got to get on it sooner than later.
Yeah, and I know we're trying to get Matt Charney from Allegis on the call today. I know he's out there and he was called into a meeting, so hopefully he's going to be able to join us during the show, and can't wait to get his perspective on that, because certainly working with Allegis and as editor of Recruiting Daily, I actually wrote about him sort of being like the wizard behind the curtain because he seems to have his ear to the ground and is pretty connected with a lot of people so often. So try to get his perspective on that. It's also interesting that we talked, you just mentioned about candidate experience. I don't know if you saw my post this morning, and I followed or even heard of Brian Solis. I've been following Brian for a number of years. He wrote a book a few years ago about the digital experience, and it had to do with more customer experience, not specifically to HR, although you and I and hopefully a lot of people that are listening to us recognize that it's one and the same, that the candidates and employees are employees as well. They're just internal customers, not necessarily external. But he released an article today, and he talked about we shouldn't be talking about the candidate experience. We should be talking about the candidate's experience. So it's candidate apostrophe S, that right. It's so profound. I mean, it's subtle, but it is absolutely the way it is, that, that companies still look at the candidate experience, well, everything, employee engagement, branding, they look at everything inside out. It's like, how can we get our message out to them? How can we make it the process easy for us? How can we capture this data that helps us? And it's the opposite. It's really an outside in. We need to understand behavior, and tying all this in, that's really what technology can do. The topic, which I never thought would take off, and I thought it was sort of a boring topic, was keeping the human, keeping the H in HR, keeping the human in HR, it's all of a sudden become this really popular topic for me. I'm doing a webinar in 2 weeks, so anybody who's on LinkedIn can catch that or connect with me. I'll give you the link. It's sponsored by Mabu Media and Execu Team Staffing. So we're doing that, but I just did it for Bright Talk, did it for SHRM National, had a lot of feedback, a lot of interest. And the misconception is technology is dehumanizing HR, when in fact, it's only because technology was misused. And now we have an opportunity to kind of step back and really utilize technology to automate what can be automated, so that we have more time to be human with more humans, to personalize things.
And that's exactly where my life work integration message falls in line, because, you almost alluded to it a little bit ago, where you said, companies need to start truly thinking of the candidate's experience and the employee experience with empathy. And the way I see the landscape, Ira, you look at how people are, what's the single greatest common denominator of every employee in every industry is that they're experiencing some level of stress. And if you truly want to have your workforce, grow in their capacity and their productivity, and we know statistically there's room for improvement everywhere, it has to come from, again, inherently inside the organization. One of the I've kind of put together during my life work integration pieces. The health of any organization is inherently equal to the health of the organisms inside of it. And if you look at the way that you need to, businesses all across the board have to really consider everyone's life if they want to consider their own success, because it's just the time has come for change, and HR is trying to figure out how to get ahead of it. And, you know, we've been talking about it this whole year, and it's been amazing to have so many different people come in with their different perspectives, and they're all speaking about the same thing. You got to use technology, you got to use it the right way, and you got to hurry up, because your people matter, and those who figure out how to do it all, they're going to be the ones that get the best people.
Well, and this will fit in well. This will fit in really well with what you're, you know, certainly with life work integration and what we're talking about. But I just saw this statistic this morning, and I put it up on LinkedIn as a post. I don't know if it'll generate any conversation, but there's 135 million people under the age of 65 that have pre-existing conditions,
Sure.
And that, you know, that doesn't include the 20% of the population that's over 65 that obviously have a lot of, I don't know if they're pre-existing conditions, but aging conditions. But from an insurance perspective, that's where it falls. That's amazing statistics, because that's literally half the population. And my focus on that was just talking about where do we go with insurance and healthcare and everything. But from the life work integration and from the stress aspect, is that I believe this is the correct statistic, you may know better than me, that 50% of all our illnesses are stress related. Because
yes. Maybe more than that, maybe more.
It might be. That's a number that just stuck in my head, but it could be. So, you know, the fact is that, you know, yes, technology stresses us out, but I think part of that, which I mentioned earlier, is because we misuse it, and we get it, you know, and we don't always use it for productivity. Sometimes, you know, there's obviously things like social media and, you know, it's convenience and email are distracting, but that's not the technology's fault. That's our fault of how we used it. So if we can teach people, if you can teach people, because, you know, you're the one, you know, that's your purpose, that's your mission. If you can help companies and individuals kind of learn to leverage technology, then, you know, it could hopefully reduce the stress and, you know, create a, I know it's not the correct word, but you know, more balance, you know, be able to show more empathy because you're not stuck behind a screen, but you're able to actually use what you learned on the screen to have a better relationship with other people.
Yes, absolutely. And it, you know, it's really about managing your relationship with stress, which is just like managing your relationship with technology, right? You have to become, the whole life work integration process really speaks to the idea of becoming more self-aware about how it is you're doing a lot of things that you might not be aware that you're doing. And you know, certainly we know based off of a whole lot of statistics and a whole lot of data that the technologies and the way that we're using phones, you know, we are a cyborg society right now. And we have to fight the habits that come with all of those brain chemicals getting released when we have that instant gratification, when we hear that ding or we get that like. There's a true habit. Habits need to be changed. And it's an easy enough process. You know, it's just one of those things where nobody's been talking about it. And now I get the opportunity to do that. But going back to something you mentioned about the workforce stress statistic, like something that came up maybe right after I had done the SHRM event in Greater Valley Forge, is how, you know, you look at Generation Z, they grew up through their school programs with some sort of stress program, managing their stress, the idea of psychological availability towards students in high schools due to all the crazy things going on in their world. You know, they go through college, and college has all of those support systems, and then they get into the real world, and their employers might not offer them anything. It seems like there's an opportunity there for organizations to really take it, demonstrate empathy towards the new employees that they have, because they're used to having some sort of support system. And I think that there's a real challenge. If you don't offer that, you might risk losing those new hires.
There's so many things we talked about through the course of the year. And in the last couple of weeks, we had Pandit Das on, our former monk, talking about mindfulness. And then we had John Dame talking about, the evolution of leadership. And we had Kerry Goyette a few weeks ago talking about emotional intelligence. Over the weekend, I think it was over the weekend, things just tend to blend in these days. There was a video from one of my favorite people, Gerd Leonhard, technology versus humanity. He was the guy that got me on this whole kick of, how can we keep the human in HR? I know I gave you the book, and I know you enjoyed it. But there was a new keynote that he did, and he did it with Brad Templeton, who's from Singularity University and a number of other organizations. And every time we talk whether it was with John Dame, whether it was Kerry, whether it was Pandit, whoever we seem to talk to, we end up talking somehow about skills that people need. And universally, the skill that people need is they need the components of it, but they need to improve their emotional intelligence. And the emotional intelligence is clearly what everybody's defining as the differentiator between humans and machines. That's going to be what differentiates us. And to go back to your point about empathy, the components of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence itself is not a skill. It's just a measure. Like IQ is not a skill. It's a measure. But the components are, one is self-awareness. How self-aware are you? The other is how do you manage, now that you know who you are and your strengths and limitations, how do you manage that? How do you get to recognize other people's strengths and limitations? And then how do you help, what's your capability of managing them? The reality is that empathy is a huge piece, because one of the factors, one of the several factors that differentiates man or humans in more general from machines is that empathy and compassion. It is complex problem-solving skills, not necessarily from the ability to solve them, but the ability to add context to them. So it's, all this, everybody we're talking to, it seems like we're talking about different subjects, but it all sort of comes back to the same thing, is that we're trying to figure out how can we help people differentiate themselves from machines, become more productive, grow, enjoy better lifestyles. It's pretty amazing that it's, I never expected this cluster of information would actually congeal and converge into something that's starting to make sense.
Yeah, it's like it's integrating, right? It's this wild reality that as we are developing as a base, let's just call it business world, all of this data integration, it feels like now's the time where the human integration is going to get some sort of an upgrade, or, on a business level, it's almost like it needs to happen, because, look at, soon to be Geeks Geezers and Googlization guest Val Grubb, right, at Workforce 2030. She demonstrated or shared her stories about leading the younger generation teams and blending in how they have been raised versus the business experiences that they have coming into the business world. And, the leadership component of organizations, absolutely, I get the sense that the very good businesses, the very good business leaders, they are putting the empathy and really putting the effort into understanding, doing the research and getting to have a good understanding about what individuals of all ages are experiencing and how they can help them improve upon those things like self-awareness, and then creativity starts to increase, collaboration starts to increase. It's the kind of things, interestingly enough, that you see in the HR technology world, starting to rise as well. And that's that notion of having some sort of technology that integrates everybody's engagement. So you've got really this form, this sense of engagement, but you can't have technology go too far ahead of the humans, because then it's not sincere and people will wind up staying disconnected. However, if you can do both, you'll be in a phenomenal spot.
Yeah, and that's sort of the danger that you see. I mean, I think people showed up at one, I think last year it was when I did it when I presented the first time, Keeping the Human in HR, which was at Lehigh Valley SHRM, which is coming up in a couple of weeks again. And then I did it again. There was another event, and then I presented at SHRM National. And I think people came to that saying, oh, good, he's going to talk about what's bad about technology, why we shouldn't use it, why we should slow down. And I'm not suggesting in any regard that one is we're even capable of stopping the change, the accelerating change because of technology, because there's too many benefits from it. There's too many things, as much as that people hate technology, it's what keeps us alive, and it allows us to live longer and have more quality lives, and it allows us to be more productive when people leverage it correctly. But again, people just used it, so incorrectly. So, you're dead on. I mean, it's not a matter of pushing back on technology. It's there's a couple of people that have said it much better than me, but some people talk about we need to manage. We need to learn how to manage the advance of technology, and I'm not even sure we can manage the advance of it, but we certainly need to become aware of what it can do, and then always ask those questions. What are some of these unintended consequences that come from using the technology? And that's what we need to manage. Is understand what the consequences are, and then how to minimize those, because if we don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. And there's just no stopping this, I won't say it's an avalanche, but the upswing of technology. I mean, the exponential, you started off this conversation perfectly. And you talked about how you think this group is finally getting it, that we're no longer living in a linear world, but an exponential world. And that's the biggest challenge. It seems that you and I face, when we're speaking with clients or audiences, is getting them to understand, because everybody's still on this linear world that, as I said during my presentation, the fact is that the topic a couple of weeks ago was Workforce 2030. The reality is 2030 will be here in 2025. 2050 will be here in 2030, but nobody's thinking that way. Everybody's thinking, oh, that's 10 years out, and that's a long way out. How can anybody predict that far? Well, we can't exactly predict. All we know it's going to be whatever you think is going to happen in 2030 is probably going to happen in half that time. And whatever is going to happen in 2050 is probably going to happen by 2030. And it's, it doesn't mean that that's going to affect everyone, that we're going to have flying cars. Everybody goes back to, by 2000, we were supposed to have flying cars. Okay, we don't have flying cars, but there's certainly been a tremendous amount of change.
Yeah, and that really, two things there. That brings to mind that notion of to get a little philosophical here, like the Taoist approach to life is to go with the flow, right? You listening to you describe the impact that, let's call, most HR people feel when somebody puts technology in front of them. They feel like a wave, like a river is like crashing down on them, and they're resisting it and they're fighting it. And in that philosophical approach, you just turn around and go with the flow. Like, you have to learn, and this is a habit thing. You really need to learn how to manage change. And to manage change means to manage stress. And when you do that, you put yourself in a holistic condition that allows you to go with the flow and accept that change is going to be challenging. And when you do that, you seek ways to make change easier. And making change easier brings us right back to having that collaboration, that empathy, that creativity environment, so that when the trouble thing happens or when somebody misses a deadline, you're able to manage it as a group and it's way more effective. It's way more fun. And, you look at HR, one of the things that you and I have talked about this after some of the presentations you've had. You wonder what it takes for people in the room, the HR professionals that are spending their time away from their busy work, to listen to guest speakers and motivational speakers. And then you wonder why so few of them don't act upon what needs to be done. I go into presentations, I don't look to sell anyone. What I do look to do is motivate people to take that first step. And I always walk in thinking no more than 5% of the group is going to take that first step. And maybe I need to get into different rooms, but I'm working on that. But it seems like HR really needs to take inertia into consideration and start doing a little bit at a time. And I think they'll find themselves moving faster than they thought they could.
Well, I don't know if we'll have time when we come back from the break, but we can talk a little bit about that. I sort of got my start, or I carved out my niche. I can't say I got my start, but because I've always used assessments in my business. But in 1996, I was introduced to somebody came up from the audience that I was speaking and introduced himself. Chuck Coker is his name. And he introduced me to a concept called the quality of motivation. And it really it helped me a great deal. But what they did some studies, and I won't give the name of the speaker, but he was one of the most famous motivational speakers in the world. And basically they started to look at how many people were actually impacted positively after those sessions. And it was really minimal. So you can always say if there's 100 people in the room and you can help one, that's a success story. But when you also recognize that there's 99% of the people who, some of them just are status quo, but some of them got worse, because if they hear what needs to be done, but they don't have the confidence to do it, or they become less motivated after because they feel they're falling further behind, or they don't understand what you said, they're actually worse off after a motivational presentation, because now they feel like failures, or bigger failures than they were before. So it was really interesting that when they started to study the people that would come to these conferences and sessions, 5 minutes after the session, everybody was inspired and motivated and energized and positive and ready to go to it. And then they go home and they look in the mirror and they wake up, or they go back to work, and it goes, gosh, I'm just not like those other people. I just have a crappier life than they do. Right. And they sort of get sucked back down into it. And that's sort of what we're struggling. And I'm not targeting HR by any means. I mean, this is universal. But you're right. I mean, we go out and people say, oh, it's a great idea, I want to implement that. And then everybody goes back to their daily way of life and go, well, when I have time or more money, I definitely want to do it. It's a good idea, but we'll do it next year. Some of these things should have been done 3 years ago, 5 years ago. It's a challenge. Hey, we are up against our break here, so we want to make sure that we can introduce our new sponsor, who you'll be hearing from in just a second. But we do want to thank Zora for joining the Geeks Geezers Googlization family here, our Googlization nation. They are one of the global leaders in HR and talent acquisition workflow automation. They have a very attractive chatbot. I know that's scary to a lot of people, but I was reading something else this morning by one of our former guests, Frank Diana. Former guest, but past guest, Frank Diana, and he was talking about 200,000 bankers are going to be out of a job within the next few years because of chatbots, and because chatbots have gotten so good. People enjoy talking with the chatbot more. So that's a lot about what Zor does. And over the next year, you're going to be hearing a lot more about him. Hopefully we'll hear from somebody in the company. But right now we are headed out to a break. You've been listening to the Geeks Geezers and Googlization show. I'm Ira Wolf. We got Keith Campagna, my co-host, on the phone live from HR Technology Conference in Las Vegas. We're getting an update. We're doing a review of our past year. Hopefully we will have our guests be available for the second half. And we're going to take a short break. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
Behind everything you're searching for is something you're actually looking for. When you search with the real Yellow Pages, you get more than a contractor. You get a whole new curb appeal. It's not just getting directions to a dry cleaner with YP.com. It's rescuing an old favorite from the back of the closet. And it's more than finding a locksmith with YP.com on your mobile. It's getting to sleep in your own bed. Whatever it might be, there are more ways to search and more ways to find exactly what you're looking for with the real Yellow Pages, YP.com, and YP.com on your mobile, only from AT&T.
Imagine how your company would grow if your candidate experience earned a 99% approval rating. Well, to get to 99%, you need the 3 best letters in recruitment technology, XOR. Zoar's text bots, chat bots, and audio bots increased IKEA's candidate conversion rate 455%. Zoar decreases candidate drop-off rates, improves your candidate experience, and collects analytics for future strategies. To learn more, check out Zoar.ai. That's XOR.ai.
Hi everyone, this is Ira Wolf, author of Recruiting in the Age of Googlization. I'm excited to announce that my online course, Recruitment Marketing for the Accidental Recruiter, is open for business. This course is the culmination of a 2-year-long project and releases recruiting tips I've learned after hundreds of hours of research, speaking with thousands of conference attendees, and interviews with dozens of experts. It's all available to you in Recruitment Marketing for the Accidental Recruiter. To receive more information or get started, visit our website at www.successperformancesolutions.com and click on the tab Recruitment Marketing for the Accidental Recruiter.
Hey, welcome back everyone to the Geeks Geezers and Googlization show. We're here with my co-host, as always, Keith Campagna, who's live in Las Vegas, the city that never sleeps, at the HR Technology Conference. It's also a special day for us. It's 1 year. This is it's our first anniversary, so it's the first episode of our second season as well. And really appreciate everybody who has been a part of this. We got a growing community, and we've also launched Googlization Nation. So you can go up to successperformancesolutions.com or GeeksGeezersGooglization.com and click on the link right at the top of the page. And all we need is an email or phone, or an email, not a phone, email and a first name, and we'll start sending you alerts, some discounts about the new course, some exclusive interviews that we got coming up, special events, and we're going to have a subscriber only membership group. So we'll be you're learning a little bit more about that, but so exciting times. So Keith, kind of when we left off, we're talking about we were talking a lot about the past year, where things are going, what's going on at HR Tech. I want to hear a little bit about what's going on with some of the vendors or some of the people that you talked to already. But I do want to give kind of a shout out to a lot of the people that we've had over the last year, and we can't go through all. I think we had 48 speakers. 48 guests, so it's kind of an amazing group. But one of the we started out last year. Our first show was sort of what we're doing today, kind of a recap and introduction. But we started out with a bang. Last year, our second show was with Jason Pfeiffer from Entrepreneur Magazine. We're talking about millennial bashing. Great guest. We just kicked the year off in full speed. We talked with Robbie Gulri, about AI and engagement, recruit, how it's going to affect things. We talked with, and hopefully I'm going to meet him next week for breakfast, but Dr. Rich Pimentel, I think is the way, or Pimentel, I think it's Pimentel, talking about what a fantastic story, he has, but talking about, disabled workers and veterans and jobs and work. And then just last week we talked with Josh Levine about culture, company culture. Great. How can you make every day be a great Monday? And in some companies the only great day is Friday because it's the end of the week. So, but Ben Eubanks a couple weeks ago, Danielle Weinblatt. We were talking about actually, what was it, 3 days after her company was sold?
Maybe even the day before she was on the show. And I'm actually
it was right after that. It was actually Friday. Yeah, we interviewed her Wednesday, and I think it was the following Monday or something that happened.
Tomorrow afternoon she's interviewing me on a podcast.
Oh, cool.
How funny is that?
Yeah, very cool. And then we had Daniel Levine, talked about the future. We had Frank Diana. We had Dr. Alan Ballou, talking about business trends. That was just in the last 3-4 months. Amazing. So
crazy.
Yeah, and up and coming is next week. We got Rhonda Lehman. She's going to be talking a lot about gender discrimination, business, sports, women. How all that plays into that. We got Jason Aver book in a few weeks. That'll be exciting, talking about.
I saw him. Like my eyes found his name tag, and he was going in the opposite direction. I was scrambling this morning trying to figure out how to get a place for the podcast, but I didn't have time. But I know that he's here. I'm going to be tracking some people down. And I've been recently connected to a bunch of other people just because I know we're booked, I think, till maybe late January, early February. And the list just keeps getting, longer and longer with cooler and cooler topics.
Yeah, we got.
I really just see a phenomenal trend here.
Yeah, a couple of weeks. I'm really excited about this. We've got because it's a new profile that we're introducing into our portfolio as well, with Dr. Diane Hamilton with the Curiosity Code Index. She's done a tremendous amount of research. She taught at the Forbes School of Business. And her passion is curiosity, which is again, one of those skills. You mentioned creativity before, and everybody talks about creativity, innovation, being something that's uniquely human, but it's driven by curiosity. If you don't have curiosity, you're not going to do either of that. We got Sherry Elliott Urey, one of the experts on generations coming up. We got Chris Dunn, Craig Fisher. We just next couple of weeks is just going to be huge. But we've had so many guests that we haven't been able to get everybody on quick enough. As far as I'm concerned, we're probably going to do a daily show. I guess we'll have to start that out soon. We'll have to figure out how to get another job or squeeze in 48 hours every day. But I started to do my LinkedIn Live. You were my first guest a couple weeks ago, and then we had Ben Eubanks right before our show. We did another one, but I've actually decided I'm going to have a weekly calendar. The times will fluctuate a little bit depending on the time to get people on. I just booked somebody from Australia. That was an interesting booking. So we're talking to him, I think, at the end of the month. But tomorrow I've got Debbie Levitt. She has not been on the show, but she's been a good friend. I was interviewed for her book that just came out, Delta CX, which is Delta Customer Experience. She's been around for years. She worked for Macy's, Disney, really understands the customer experience, the user experience, kind of introducing some new terms. So I'm going to be live with Debbie talking about her new book, Delta CX, tomorrow at what's the date? October 3rd, 3 p.m. If you're connected with me on LinkedIn, you'll get a notice as soon as we go live. If not, you can go to my feed after that, and then I'll have the link and we'll publicize that. And then next Tuesday, the 10th, I'm with Jonathan Duarte, 11:30. And he connected with me about the evolution of the job application. And again, he's actually is with Go Hire now, and he's done a ton of work with chatbots. So we're going to be talking about that. And then the following week is going to be with Chris Denny. And I just got his book yesterday. It's called Improve Attention to Detail. Everybody talks about being more attentive to detail and being easily distracted in the world we live in. That's probably the number one trait that everybody says, can you test for attention to detail? Well, he's got an interesting perspective. So on October 15th at noon, and all these will be up on the website and on LinkedIn, October 15th at noon, he will be my guest on LinkedIn. And again, those are a little shorter, about 20 to 30 minute interviews live. There'll be some video, but nice. So we got Debbie tomorrow. Yeah. Nice. Tune in October 3rd. I know you'll still be on the ground out there. That'll be noon for you, but spread the word a little bit. And 3 p.m. we'll be talking about her take on UX and customer experience. So, but you're on the ground in Vegas at this conference, 10,000 people. Who have you seen? What have you talked to? What's sort of the unexpected surprises you've
Right.
you've caught?
I got to tell you, I had a funny little aha moment yesterday evening. So what really kicked off for me this year, because I'm in startup mode, I'm actually out here promoting and looking to do business with regards to HROI. And it's hilarious, Ira, because for the first time ever, I'm not a vendor. Which
that's right. Yeah, you've always been on the other side.
Being a vendor, you got to earn a conversation with people, and sometimes people don't want to talk. Like you get that feeling that not everybody wants to talk to another vendor, but now everybody wants to talk to me because I'm coming up to them, and they ask me what I do, and then I simply ask them to tell me more what they do. And then at the end of it, we basically get to the point. I'm out here with Mike Farber, the CEO of the ROI shop, and we get to the point with all of these vendors, and we basically present to them the idea of so are you having a good time selling business fast, or is it harder than you thought? And Ira, we've got all of the vendors we talked to yesterday for 2 hours are now interested in buying the ROI tool. Everybody sees it as a phenomenal idea. And it was such a crazy cool experience to see people that I used to work with that are now running sales teams for large organizations, really large organizations. And they were always a fan of the way I worked for them and the creativity that I brought to the equation. And so people are enthusiastically giving me the dirt, letting me know what their business challenges are. And so for me personally, it's been a phenomenal experience because everybody is here and everybody's engaged and happy to see me for the most part, right? What's interesting in terms of being just a walking around part of this, a non-booth having person, is how much change is happening inside all of these software companies. Oracle is doing a huge announcement with regards to their HCM approach, and I don't really know much about it. I kind of chuckled at the idea that Oracle was doing something with HR, but I guess sooner or later somebody's got to keep up. And there are software companies that I met 2 years ago while representing JobVite that are now rebranding, that are now acquiring or being acquired. And the change has always been there, but it's pretty wild to see right in front of my eyes just how people are growing and starting to integrate, and certain companies are partnering with other companies. Paradox AI, this is a company that I've been watching for about 18 months now, and they just signed an agreement with McDonald's to do, we talk about bankers being laid off. McDonald's is essentially chatbotting and AIing their entire front end process in a massive scale. And it's just wild to see certain technologies are getting those advancements, leaving room for new people. And then you see some companies that aren't here anymore.
And maybe I missed the connection, or maybe Paradox is working with another initiative from McDonald's. But just the other day, if you saw it, and again, it certainly caught my attention because I talk about revamping the whole application process and the application format, the way we hired people and the questions that we asked. But McDonald's launched their first voice-activated application.
Yep.
And I don't even know if I mentioned this to you or on the air or to anybody. A few people I might have, but I actually just submitted my additions, it's additional chapters and a little bit of a rewrite for the second edition of Recruiting in the Age of Googlization. So
nice.
Yeah. So by December, hopefully it will be out and we'll be in the second edition. And with that, I went back and it was there was a couple things I just, I started to read. I was just checking, did I write about this before? And it's I must have been having a couple of good days. It was kind of a work, it was like a 2-year work in progress to get the book done. And especially the last 6 months, because I wrote it and then I rewrote it and then I rewrote it again because there were so many things that were changing. But when I went back to it, I talked about and you've heard me say this in my presentations, that by 2020, that voice search would be 30 to 50% of all search. That's how it's going to be activated. You're going to talk into Alexa or Cortana or Siri or whatever device, and that's how the search would begin. But we also inferred that was how I wrote a little blip at some point, and I forgot that I actually included it in my book. I thought it was some new idea I had, and I actually had it 2 years ago when I was 2.5 years ago when I actually wrote about it, and just sort of got buried down there. It was about calling Siri. It's like, or I can't remember if I said Siri or Alexa or whoever it was. It's like, hey Siri, I'm looking for a new job. Can you, who's hiring locally at 20, at $20 an hour or $100,000 a year, whatever, in a certain industry, and it would then tell you who it was. And then say, so can I have your name? How can we get in touch with you? How many years of experience do you have? And it would actually take the application right then. So, I've been talking about it coming. Well, last week, huge announcement by McDonald's that they now will have voice activated applications. So I don't know if that's Paradox or someone else, but
they're part of it. They're a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's a huge initiative, and it's not then, but then it's, okay, how do we get that information from, Alexa and Google Home? How do we get that information digitized, into our CRM or HCM or ATS, whatever it might be? It's not a separate system, but it's how do we get the flow there? Which all of this is just so foreign, because no one's going to answer 55 questions on a home device for you to get them to apply. Right. Which goes back full circle to what we talk about all the time.
Yeah. And it's funny, that's the stuff that I talked about, that I put a comment out there for Chip Cutter, Wall Street Journal writer on LinkedIn, posted about automated interviews by way of phone. And I put a comment out there that wound up getting quoted in the Wall Street Journal exactly about that disengagement. But here we are, buddy. The end of the first episode,
second year, right? Yeah.
We missed Matt Charney. We didn't need him. He's snarky. He'll figure out a way to get back on our show. But,
absolutely. Yeah, I'm disappointed. I mean, Matt really is one of the HR leaders, kind of online leaders, for sure. Yeah. And it was interesting getting his take, especially from out there. So disappointed, but we'll absolutely going to get back. And maybe we just get him lined up for a LinkedIn Live in the interim, because, this is all fresh and hot. I'd love to hear what he has to say. So maybe you can corral him, and I'll send you the link, and for the dates that are open for October and November, and we'll go there. But gosh, I mean, again, I'm jealous that you're out there, Keith. Wish I could be there next week. I already kind of put it on the calendar as a tickler, not to schedule anything, else. And hopefully next year we both can be out at the HR Technology Conference in Las Vegas. A lot of good stuff going on. Before we wrap up, any closing remarks?
Just a thank you. Thank you to you. Thank you for the listening audience. We're having a great time with the statistics that we're getting from the sources in terms of iHeartRadio and iTunes. There's a lot more people than I thought we were going to have. I know you feel the same way. So thanks for listening. Tell your friends. There's a lot of good stuff that we talked about that's online, and so much more to come. And it's all about the future work here.
Yeah, you mentioned about putting the shoe on the other foot, being out there at the HR Tech Conference, and for the first time ever, you're not a vendor. You're walking around, so everybody wants to talk to you. And that's really been our experience with Geeks Geezers and Googlization. It's like, how did I get on that podcast? Let me reach out. And now we've got, again, we just got a growing list and better, I can't say better and better people, because the people that we started out with were great people. They really are. I'm not being, flattery will get me everywhere, but they really were. I mean, we started off with some top-notch people, and it just hasn't given up, haven't relented. So, again, you've been listening to the Geeks Geezers and Googlization show. Thanks, everyone, for helping us have a very very, very successful first year. Appreciate everybody joining in for the launch of our second year and celebrating our first anniversary. If you're interested in being a guest or a sponsor, just sharing a few thoughts, call us, connect with us through our website, Geeks Geezers and Googlization.com. Don't forget to join Googlization Nation. You can do that on the website, geeksgeezersgooglization.com. You can also connect with Keith or me on LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks again to Zor.ai for being our new sponsor, one of our new sponsors, and of course, Success for Performance Solutions for renewal. Don't forget to join us next week, Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, w4cy.com, or listen to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeart, and a host of other ones. Until the next episode of Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization, this is Ira Wolf and Keith Campagna. Don't let the shift hit your plans.